right-hand corner, it starts off with SDPM 018436, and that number is sequential on the very next page, and it reads SDPM 018437. So those numbers are sequential. It does appear that there must be somebody must have printed it or enlarging it, but it's consistent with the numbers. So the numbers are consistent. So this could be something to do in the printing itself. Either the font or the print is darker or lighter, but those two numbers are consistently consecutive, ending with 36 and ending with 37. That's about the best explanation, sir, for now I could provide, other than saying the originals then should be sought from the department.
Thank you, Mr. Sheikh. If it assists Commissioner Musi, Mr. Steyn also has a copy of this letter as an annexure to his bundle. We will extract the copy therefrom and provide it to the Commission tomorrow morning if it may assist the Commissioner to clarify the issue.
I don't think it's necessary.
Thank you, Chair. If there are no further questions arising from Annexure L, therefore, may we proceed, Mr. Sheikh, to your paragraph 40 at page 16 of your statement. Are you there? Now, from paragraph 40, you deal with the Special Ukozi Control Council meeting. Please talk to us about what you have set out in paragraph 40.
The Ukozi Control Council is normally a project coordinating council. Each project in the department gets a name. This particular one had the name Ukozi, and it has a control council. This is largely an interface between the Air Force and Arms Corps and the rest of the Defense Department. It was at the time of April 24th, 1998, where a military value of higher than 60% was sought before an RFO could be issued to the respective bidders. So the significance here was that the military value of 60% and higher is used, and that is reflected in the minutes of that meeting under Annexure M. Under page 265. Under agenda point 5.1.2, it reads as follows. The following manufacturers / aircraft should receive an RFP based on a military value result from the value system above 60% and a life cycle cost effectiveness of 8. Thank you. If I may add, the other point worthy of note in the same minutes is something that's stated in the note, and I think is note 2. It says the Hawk 100 is the only aircraft in the recommended shortlist that could be linked to the Alpha procurement in the government-to-government packages. Full stop.
If one has regard to page 264 of Annexure M, I note that you attended this meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
then did you understand note 2, as you have just read out, regarding the Hawk 100?
I think at this time it was more about the configuration of the aircraft, design philosophy, the interior of the aircraft being the cockpit, etc. That in order to go to the Alpha aircraft, there was 2 aircrafts in that category, in the Alpha and the Lift, that had a commonality on design philosophy. That will be the cockpit, will be the avionics, etc., that had a commonality. So if you want to keep a form of continuum, then these 2 aircrafts offered that continuum with regard to the way the cockpit layout, etc., is designed.
Thank you. You proceeded at paragraph 41 to have reference to the South African Command Council meeting on the 30th of April 1998. What's the relevance of that?
The relevance is again, there's a note that this meeting of the previous meeting may have been incorrectly entitled as the Causes Control Council meeting, but in fact it should have been the Air Force meeting. So if I could just go back again to that minute. And the other point of note, again, this minute is reflecting 68% rather than the 60%.
Please refer us to the relevant passage in the minute.
It is on page 269 under agenda point 5.1.2. I read, decision. The following manufacturers / aircraft should receive an RFP based on a military value result from the value system above 68% and cost not taken into account at all.
Do we understand you correctly that as at the 24th of April 98, that meeting, Annexure M, recognized the military value to be no less than 60%. And a week later, that value was increased from 60 to 68%. Is that correct?
Yes, a special note is, for me to bring to attention as well. I was not present at this 30th of April meeting.
And the second issue you point out is that at the meeting of the 30th of April, the decision was to increase the value system and cost not to be taken into account. Is that correct?
On the April of 30th April, at the new Air Force Command Council meeting.
What did you understand by the requirement that cost not be taken into account at all?
I'm sorry, just before I get lost. I see this statement where it says that the minutes of this meeting reflect a decision to recommend to the AAC a value system above 68% and with costs not taken into account. Where did he pick up this paragraph?
Chair, what the witness had directed us to is now Annexure N. N for Nelly. And that is titled Special Ukosi Control Council Meeting 28B/98, held at some room B101 on 30 April 1998. And if you turn over to page 268. Sorry, 269, my apologies, Chair. At item 5.1.2, what the witness read regarding the cost issue appears therein.
Before we leave this point, can we just find out from him? I see this decision at 5.1.2. Where does this notion emanate from that evaluations can be made without taking costs into account?
So I was trying to trace back that decision, whether it was something that came from the minister or something that came from the Air Force itself. It appears that part of that decision of this visionary approach adopted by the minister was after this presentation. I want to separate the issue about the visionary approach and this cost non-costed. What was coming out quite clearly is that the aircraft categories can be clustered into different clusters of pricing. For each price range, you get a specific type of performance that goes within that. These are, in my view, arbitrary clusters. You could very well take a cluster from 60 to 70 and have a cluster within that category, rather than saying I got a cluster from 70 to 80. So the number that originally started off by saying let's use 60 as a cutoff, which means that there were other aircraft that would have been cheaper than the MB339. By moving this continuously upwards, you go from 60 to 68 to 69 to the point where 69 is an arbitrary number. This number doesn't come out of any investigations that says there's an internationally accepted number called 69. It's just an arbitrary number. But what 69 in fact does, it then makes the only other aircraft that just goes above 69 to be the MB339. So this issue about if you push up the value of the military value, if you push the number of the military value up, then the issue of cost becomes important, because where should you place the correct number? So this issue about cost, non-cost, is largely due to the fact that you have military performance on one hand and cost on the other, and that graph is quite steep. It's not a linear relationship. So the better performance aircraft will sit at a higher military value, and the cheaper aircraft will sit on the left-hand side with a lower performance. So the Air Force thought it was prudent that a better way to address it is if there should be cost or should there be no cost. If money is not the deciding criteria, then you want a better performance aircraft. So if you take the word money out, you get a better performance aircraft. So my understanding, a large part of this came from the Air Force itself.
What do you think could have been the reason? And I'll tell you why. It's because this means that it referred us to. We just see this statement talking about non-costed option. And I can tell you one of the witnesses testified and said that you gave him instructions to do the calculations on the non-costed option. I specifically asked that witness, where does this emanate from? And the witness said that you gave him instructions to do a calculation based on non-costed option. And I think it's an issue that you really need to deal with properly.
I understand, sir. First of all, it's not in my management delegation to issue such instructions. It wasn't my role, my responsibility, etc. That matter is purely an Air Force matter on functionality, because functionality of aircraft and cost goes hand in hand. And the Air Force has made those presentations to itself under the Air Force Command Council that this is the type of aircraft it would prefer if cost was not a consideration. So the concept, the notion of let's do a calculation with cost and without cost is an Air Force presentation. And as I go further down, you'll see that the Air Force presented to itself and to the ministers a non-costed option. So this has always been an issue within the Air Force.
Maybe let's leave this question of the costed and non-costed options for tomorrow. I'll tell you why. It says I've made my full notes about that issue which I thought I was going to raise with the witness, and for some strange reason I left my notes at home. So maybe can we resolve this question and deal with it tomorrow? So I wanted to say something here.
Just for the record, I needed to answer the very specific question you posed to me. I did not instruct anyone to include cost and non-cost option. I was merely accepting the presentation from the Air Force. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We would be able to deal with this matter tomorrow, which means, according to our statement, we would skip paragraphs 40 to 43, which is where the whole issue of costed, non-costed, and the adjusted military value is dealt with. And
why don't I just mention, I see some of the notes that I've made here. Some of the notes that I've made here, it appears as if some have seen where it is said that at a special SAAF Command Council meeting held on 29 June 1998, the LEAF recommendation to be presented to SOFCOM was formulated and approved. Following decisions were minuted. Para 3.3, a special recommendation is required where cost is not taken into account as per the request from the Minister of Defense. I think I've seen that type of statement in 2 or 3 of the meetings. And 2 or 3 of the minutes. Unfortunately, I've left those minutes at home. And I wanted to put this to that witness and ask him to comment on that. So that is why I was suggesting that maybe let's leave that question of non-costed and costed option until tomorrow morning.
Indeed, Chair. In fact, the witness deals with this issue specifically in these paragraphs because we drew his attention to the fact that there is probably a general understanding among the commissioners by now that the whole issue of costed, non-costed was introduced by him in the procurement process. And in a bid to counter that, he has provided minutes of the SAF command and the Ukozi Project Council to try and track when this issue first arose. And the minute that he refers to at Annexure N, page 266, would appear, at least for now, and that is the minute of the 30th April 1998, would appear for now to be the first time that the notion of costed and non-costed appears. The minute the chair referred to is a minute of June 1998. And by then, when the witness deals with the decision of the Ukozi Control Council of the 30th April 1998, I believe the chair would understand what the minute of the June date then means. That would not be the first time that the matter arises. That would be a continuation of a matter that has been the subject of discussion and presentation to the AAC as of the 30th of April 1998. We do, however, agree that to enable the commissioners to find their notes on this very important aspect, and probably overnight, the witness as well to align his documents, his ducks in a row, so to speak, to prepare himself to come and engage with this issue in full tomorrow morning, so that at least from his perspective, the commissioners are able to understand the genesis of this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. With your permission then, Chair and Commissioner Musi, as I indicated, we would skip paragraphs 40 to 43. 40 in fact, to 43, which is where these issues are dealt with, and we will start off with them tomorrow morning. We will now proceed to paragraph 44 on page 18. Mr. Sheikh, do you have that paragraph?
Yes, I do.
From paragraph 44, you are back again dealing with the meetings, or the meeting of the management committee we have referred to earlier. And by now, as you have testified, following the draft constitution, it is now referred to as SOFCOM. Please take us through your paragraph 44, if you can.
The key point in paragraph 44 that I wanted to address was, at which point in time did we all become aware of the meeting to be scheduled for SOFCOM 1st and 2nd of July 98, where we will be receiving the consolidation of the value results. So paragraph 44 talks about the 6th of May 1998 SOFCOM meeting chaired by Mr. Eric Estesen. I was not present at this meeting, it should be pointed out. The letter of the Department of Finance for the Secretary of Defense requesting a representative was discussed. The feedback to the Council of Defense meeting was outlined. A date was set by the members present for the consolidation of the evaluation results for 1st and 2nd July 98, and that will be in Annexure Q. And I'll get you it's page 301. It starts from page 301. And it's the minutes of the Strategic Office Committee, and that's the name that we present out there. And that paragraph will come towards the end. And it's on page 304 under 8D. It states the evaluation consolidation by SOFCOM will proceed as a 2-day workshop at InfoPlan on the 1st and 2nd of July 1998, incorporating the scheduled July 98 SOFCOM. The importance here is I was not present, and it's reflected on the very first page under the introduction. The chairman opened the meeting at 1400 hours and advised that Mr. Sheikh had tendered his apologies. So this is the day where the meeting was set by Mr. Estesen for the 1st and 2nd of July. Thank you.
Now, staying with that minute, At page 303, under matters arising, at item 4, please identify what's stated therein and explain which document reference is had to here.
I'm sorry, I was just getting myself. May I just repeat?
303, the same unit
Yes.
of the SOFCOM of 6 May 98. If you turn to page 303, at item 4 under matters arising.
Yes, that was the letter to the Department of Finance that was spoken about right in the beginning at the Council of Defense of, I think, 20th March, that I subsequently wrote the letter for the Secretary of Defense on the 14th of April. So it is saying in this and noting that the letter requesting official from Department of Finance participation in the evaluation was dispatched on the 14th of April. It's a note to say that requirement has been executed.
And just for the sake of completeness, would that letter be the one appearing as your annexure L at pages 254 and 255 that Commissioner Musi earlier engaged you on?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. We understand then that as at 8 May 1998, SOFCOM had decided that it would set aside the 1st and 2nd of July 98 as the date for consolidation of results. At paragraph 45, you deal with another briefing on the 20th of May 98 to the SOFCOM members. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes, it's a progress report with regard to where the various project teams are at in their phase of the evaluation. So it lists the various programs and the work executed up until that point in time. So it's a progress report from the various teams on where they are at the moment.
And according to the record, Mr. Esther Hazer chaired this meeting and you also were present.
Yes.
What then transpired as regards the SDPs post the meeting of the 20th May 1998, which is what you begin to deal with from paragraph 46 on page 18. Starting from paragraph 46 of your statement, at page 18, we have now dealt with the minute of the 20th of May 1998 of the SOFCOM, or the progress report, as you term it.
Yes, I was merely stating that by the time I started to assume my full delegation and responsibility, the RFI, RFO process was already complete before I started to take over as Chief of Acquisition.
What exactly do you mean by complete?
Complete in the sense that invitations were given out to the respective bidders and the information or the tenders from the respective bidders were in, which means I'm now taking over or involved in a process as a chair, sort of midway through the process rather than the beginning of the process.
At paragraph 47, you explain that the Defense Staff Council was involved in long and intense work sessions, and there are other points you make in that paragraph. Could you explain to the Commission what the contents of paragraph 47 are all about?
Yes, this was a period where we undergone the integration, transformation, and now we get into the rationalization where staff and post has to be fulfilled, separation of command and control has to be executed. So it was literally all-day work sessions taking place within the department, and this had in some way negative effect on the acquisition forums that had to meet at a regular intervals so other programs can be executed. So on Annexure S, a letter to the Secretary is attached indicating the difficulty experienced by the Acquisition Department on cancellations or the non-forming of these forums to execute the acquisition task. So if I go to Annexure S, starting from page 320, it's a letter from me to the Secretary of Defense where we're stating that the Schedule AACB and AASB has been superseded by the conventions of the transformation of the Defense Staff Council over the allocated time slots for the AASB and AACB. And we state these two meetings that had to be postponed or abandoned for whatever the reason. The forthcoming AASB schedule for 17th of June 98 has been superseded by transformation DSC without prior notice, and rescheduling of the members' diaries at such short notice warning is impossible. The scheduled June 98 AASB cannot be convened because most of the members are involved in transformation. So I'm trying to point out that there's a huge exercise of transformation that's taking place, having these regular meetings, having these meetings where everybody comes in and sits down, approves the project, and the Secretary signs off. There are some issues of complexity because of the transformation, long hours undertaken at the transformation. So that's the relevance of it.
You then conclude in that letter at paragraph 3 with a suggestion. Could you read that?
Yes. Paragraph 3 reads, it is requested that an alternative schedule for the AASB, accepted and diarized by the members, be provided, or that the AASB be scheduled as a standing arrangement after the transformation of the DSC meetings that occur on the third Wednesday of every month. Fixed times for the AASB are needed to permit full AASB membership, arms corps in brackets included, to plan and to arrange presentations accordingly. This implies that the Transformation Defense Staff Council must stop at a fixed time, probably 1300 hours, to allow the members to reconvene as the AASB at 1300 hours 30. So the issue here is, as the manager of the acquisition department, we were having great difficulty in having these fixed times, fixed allocations. Previous minutes of that meeting has to be signed because projects get executed as meetings are signed off, and monies then has to be transferred from what we call the F1 budgeting authority to F2 budgeting authority. So this will affect spending of monies within the budget, excluding the SDP, just talking regular projects.
You proceed then at paragraph 48 to deal again with matters relating specifically to SOFCOM. Can you take us through that?
Yes. This again was a very special meeting which I was not present at. And this was a meeting where it was decided by the chair at the time, Mr. Esteisen, on how the format to the presentation of the project teams should look like or be when it's presented to the AAC. So the issue of program costs was introduced, and the format of the layout of how we should receive the information from the project teams was presented. That is on Annexure T, and I'll take you through Annexure T on page 322. of significant importance is that this was a meeting between Eric as the Armsco representative and the project team leaders, and it's written in hand, TL meaning team leader for finance, the chair or team leader for the Corvette, team leader for the Corvette, team leader for NIP, team leader for TIP, and then you got the chair for the LUH and the MH program, team leader for the LUH program, and the team leader for the subs, team leader for Alpha. In here is the issue of program cost best value, which is the standard formula we had. Of significance is the program cost. If you go down to paragraph 3.2, it reads, format for presentation to the AAC. So when the SOFCOM gets this data, how it should present its data to the AAC. And it says you should put it down as program, country supplier, product name, quantity, program cost, financing value, military value, industrial participation, best value, and ranking. And this is by and large the process that was followed. So it was chaired by Eric. That was the recommendation to the project team, and that's how it eventually transpired.
You term this a special meeting. It was not a SOFCOM meeting really as such. It was purely a meeting between Mr. Esterhuis and the various team leaders on advice of how best to present the evaluation results to the SOFCOM. Is that what you state in 48?
I am not terming it special meeting. It was termed a special meeting, signed by Eric. No provisions were made for my signature as co-chair. So it was just called a special meeting. It didn't say special meeting of SOFCOM. It just said special meeting.
You end paragraph 48 with the comment that the format presented at this meeting became the standard for the reporting of the evaluation results of the respective programs to the various acquisition forums. Are we to understand that the format as recommended at in that document, and in particular at page 323, is how then the results were in fact presented per program to SOFCOM?
By and large, yes. This would then be followed through from the two secretaries or the coordinators, both Mr. Captain Derek Dewey and Davik Riso would have been the coordinators who would then carry through this in the SOFCOM.
Thank you. You then at paragraph 98, sorry,
49.
Paragraph 49, my mistake, I apologize. You deal again with a communication from Mr. Esterhuis, your co-chair in SOFCOM. Could you take us through that one?
Yes, this was a memorandum sent by Mr. Eric Esterhuis to the co-chair of SOFCOM that talks about his non-availability, but it's very ambiguous in the sense that, if I may read it, in view of my absence during the following 3 weeks, I hereby wish to appoint Mr. K.P. Hanafi as my secundus in the capacity of co-chair of the SOFCOM. So here was a meeting set by my co-chair for the first and second, and he then sends a letter appointing a secundus.
I think earlier before you read that document, you said it was addressed to the co-chair of SOFCOM. Is that what you stated?
No, I'm sorry, it's an error. It was just sent to the Strategic Office Committee. He is, in fact, under him is written co-chair. So my error is it was from the co-chair, and it wasn't sent to me specifically. It was sent to the Strategic Office Committee. So it's not to the secretary, not to the coordinator, not to the co-chairman. It's just entitled Strategic Office Committee.
And when did you become aware that your co-chair would not be available to sit for the 1st and the 2nd of July during the presentation of the evaluation results?
To the best of my recollection, I only got aware of this the day the meeting started on the 1st and the 2nd. The day the meeting started on the 1st.
Do you confirm that the SOFCOM meeting proceeded nonetheless on the 1st and the 2nd and received evaluation results without Mr. Hester?
Yes, it would have been the board coordinators stroke secretaries would have alerted us of Eric appointing a secondus.
You, at paragraph 50, deal with a further document regarding the work session scheduled for the 1st and 2nd of July. Would you like to talk to that?
Yes, an agenda for that 1st and 2nd SOFCOM meeting was drawn up by Captain Dewey, the coordinator stroke secretary of SOFCOM, detailing how the committee envisaged proceeding on those 2 days, outlining which program would be presented first and which program would be presented last over the 2 days. Of significance importance is that it was sent to the various arms of service chiefs, Chief of Finance, Chief of Army, Chief of Air Force, Chief of Navy, Chief of Intelligence, and ARMSCO, the various divisional heads within ARMSCO. For information, on page 331 is the Secretary of Defense. So the Secretary of Defense would have received a copy of this letter alerting him that there is a evaluation process or consolidation process taking place on the 1st and the 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. In so alerting the Secretary of Defense was by providing him with a copy of the agenda for info only, or was it an invitation for him to attend the presentations?
It's for info only. So he's aware of the SOFCOM having that evaluation meeting.
Chair and Commissioner Musi, at paragraph 51 of the statement on pages 19 leading on to 20, we again deal there with the issue of costed and non-costed options, and by agreement with the Commission, we will stand down what's stated in that paragraph and deal with it tomorrow morning.
I agree. Can we try and get a copy of those minutes? Because I think those minutes are important, because the paragraph that I quoted is from this minute. And I see in the statement that portion that I thought it was important, it's not included. Because the portion that I saw this document from, it says that that option of the non-costed option was per the request of the minister. So can we try and get hold of this of the minutes of this particular meeting?
Chair, if the commissioners have regard to page 20 at the end of paragraph 51, there is an extra W in the witnesses pack, and that would be the minutes of the 29th of June 1998 of the SAF Command Council. Mr. Sheikh, you heard the interaction I had with the chair. What we deal with in paragraph 51, we will skip for today. We will come back to it tomorrow morning when we deal with all the other issues relating to the costed and uncosted option. Thanks. We then move on to paragraph 52. And we are now on the 1st and the 2nd of July 98, and SOFCOM is having its present evaluation results. Would you like to talk the commissioners through that?
Yes. the membership of this committee comprised members from DTI, Department of Finance, Department of Defense, Arms of Service, Arms Corps. To the best of my recollection, both the coordinators took notes, recorded the number or the points scored per program, per category, and we followed the convention as recommended by Eric in that special meeting of the 10th of June. For each of the programs, if you were to take any specific program, if you were to take some of the non-contentions one, let's say the tank program, the product or name was put down, the country where that product comes from, the technical scores out of 100 was tabulated, the industrial participation was tabulated, and that was broken down into 2, defense, non-defense, and then the finance scoring was put down. So each of the project teams were asked to come in independently, and I think they may have handed in a small report of some sort to both the coordinators and the committee, and they wrote down the score that they had scored for each of the bidders, and that was written down: technical team, DIP team, NIP team, and the finance team. And at the end of that program, both the coordinators would have then added up the score, and the committee members would have then assisted them in making sure that the addition is correct. So that was a pure mechanical exercise of adding scores being written down on the board. It was written on a board in the room, and those numbers then were added up. So there was no room for manipulation of the numbers by any committee member or any project team. No project team knew the score of the previous project team, and vice versa, and no member could influence any individual score per category. It was a pure addition. So whatever the numbers came out to be was what the numbers, was what the ranking scored out to be.
And the minutes of this first and second presentations is your annexure X appearing at page 345, is that so?
Yes.
Now, you spoke of coordinators. Do you recall who these were and what specifically was their function?
Both Derek and Captain Derek Dewey, and Darby Gristle were secretaries/coordinators of this meeting, in the sense that they had to receive the documentation, ensure the documentation from each of the project team is received, and that the scores that the project team presents to the committee is the correct scores as reflected in their handed documents. So that was the check, that whatever was written down on the board would be exactly the same as what is in the presentation itself.
You are aware that each program or each team prepared an evaluation report in respect of the program that they managed, a formal evaluation report that was signed off. Are you aware of that?
Yes, that would have been part of the requirement to hand it in. I cannot recall specifically if every member got one or just the coordinators, but a report would have been submitted.
Do I understand you correctly that the figures that were captured by the coordinators in respect of each program would correspond with the figures and details provided in the evaluation reports per program? Would that be a fair conclusion?
Yes, that would be a fair conclusion.
have you had opportunity to consider and or verify the accuracy of what the coordinators captured and what is contained in the evaluation reports at any time?
No, I would not.
Now, if I may take you to that minute of the 1st and 2nd July 1998 at page 345. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Firstly, if you could help clarify this for me, at page 346, regarding the main battle tank, under item 3, it is stated that VAT and ad valorem was calculated 26% and included in the program cost in respect of the main battle tank. My question to you is, if these were imported, all this was imported equipment, what percentage for VAT was used and applied? Do you know that?
I may not recall it offhand, but it's the issue of the standard VAT, 14%, etc. So I'll stand maybe under correction until I see the documentation.
Accepting your explanation now, if you go to page 347, under maritime helicopter, item 21 of the same minute, and you will find there that as regards the maritime helicopter, it stated the uncertainty regarding the inclusion of VAT in the Eurocopter offer must be clarified. Are you able to explain to the Commission what these difficulties were of the inclusion of VAT in the helicopter, whereas it's accepted that VAT is payable in regard to the other programs?
At some point, we would have had to do a standardization of, does the prices all include VAT or does it all exclude VAT? As a program management or as a program manager within the department, we were under obligation to include all statutory costs ultimately when you make a presentation to higher level. So it may be different at a program manager's level where VAT may not necessarily be an issue, but as you go seek authority for a particular budget, you have to include all costs, that is program management costs, statutory costs, etc. So hence the Eric Estezen's briefing to the project team on what to include has relevance. So the question is whether the project teams executed it. So my understanding is that at some point when we did the final presentation, we had to include the statutory cost.
I understand about the statutory cost. My question related specifically to VAT, and just wanted to check whether your understanding was that VAT was payable on these transactions, and if so, what the difficulty then was with including it in the maritime helicopter. Do you know, or don't you?
I cannot comment at this point on the maritime helicopter in absence of some of the documents. Yeah.
The other issue I would want to discuss with you is on page 348, overlift. But that again is the issue of lift. And we are back to costed and non-costed. And again, I would ask that we park this matter until tomorrow morning, Chair. At page 348, item 29 of that minute. You understand, Mr. Sheikh, that we will come back to this minute tomorrow to deal specifically with paragraph 29?
I do.
Now, you have annexed to your papers, or in particular to Annexure X, handwritten notes of the results presentation of the 2 days. Why is that?
I thought it was important to have a full comprehension of what transpired that day, and sometimes it's best reflected in the handwritten notes of the scribe of the day, being Captain Derek Dewey. So this is handwritten notes of Captain Derek Dewey, giving us an indication of what really happened, at what time did the program start, what was the issues that were recorded, and in this particular case, although we have this matter standing down to tomorrow, would have been the issue of costed, non-costed, which is merely a note made that costed and non-costed issues were here. It doesn't say that the chair instructed, it doesn't say who instructed, other than to say 2 options for the military value to be included. That's it. So it was presented, my contention is it was presented on that day.
Is it your contention that the formal minutes, typed minutes of 1st, 2nd July are not as detailed as the handwritten notes? Hence you provide the handwritten notes to fill in the gaps wherever you believe they arise?
Yes, that is true, and also to the fact that it shows what really was written from the handwritten notes to the final type. So if anything was added, deleted, this is a much better reflection of what the secretary at the time recorded.
Thank you. Having concluded that paragraph, that would take having dealt then with paragraph 52, that would take us to the acquisition forum period, and you begin to deal with that from paragraph 53. Do you have it?
Yes, I do.
At paragraph 53, you deal with the presentation to the ASB on 8th July 1998. Would you take us through that?
This is the first time that we're now presenting the consolidated results of all the bidders per category of equipment to the AASB. Of importance there is the invitation extended to the Director General of DTI and the Chief of SANDF. Traditionally, the AASB is only chaired by one Director General. Here we have 2 other Director Generals invited, being the Chief of SANDF and being the Director General of DTI. So the Director General of DTI is assuming to some degree the responsibility of the scoring that was done by his staff under the IP section. And to some extent, the Chief of SANDF is also representing his arms of service chiefs within his command line. So if we turn to Annexure Y, and Annexure Y would be page 238, moving on to page 239. It will show you the various people represented at that meeting, and you'd see.
Excuse me.
239. Yes.
Okay. I apologize to do that. I think we just misled the commissioners. You read an old pagination. The correct page of annexure Y is 359.
Yes.
Not 238. Thanks.
Thank you. It's my error. On page 359, you'd see under invitees is the Director General of DTI and the Chief of SANDF. And a presentation was made with all the members of SOFCOM present. All the programs were stipulated. And in the end, in the overall summary, it notes that the AASB noted that the progress and resolves not to make a pronouncement on what was presented. So the chair took a conscientious decision not to make a pronouncement. However, the Minister of Defence and the members of AAC must be advised of the progress. And the last bullet will be arrangements to brief the Minister of Defence on 13 July, followed by a select cabinet committee. Briefing on the 21st July are underway. So of significance is a decision, conscientious decision was taken not to make a pronouncement.
Just so we are clear, what exactly does not making a pronouncement mean? This is a meeting where SOFCOM presents to the AASB, the second level of decision-taking fora. So when ASB takes resolves not to make pronouncements, what do you understand that to mean, or what did you understand that to mean?
These were all cardinal projects. And a cardinal project is defined as anything that has a monetary value above 80 million rands or had a degree of higher level national issues attached to it. So there's a whole lot of descriptions of what makes a cardinal project. So in this particular case, the Director Generals all decided that it be best served before the Minister, rather than making a decision on the correctness of a selection or a recommendation.
Is it not so that in terms of MODAC and departmental policies, AACB makes a recommendation to AASB, which in turn makes a recommendation to AAC? Am I correct in my understanding?
You are correct in your understanding.
So I am then to understand that in this instance, when an evaluation report is presented to the AASB, the decision of the AASB is not to make a recommendation to the AAC as it's standard and prescribed by policies, but to direct SOFCOM to make a presentation directly to AAC. Am I understanding that correctly as well?
Yes, you're understanding it correct. It would affect particularly the LIFT program, where two options was presented to the committee. The committee decided that not to make that pronouncement. If I could also just conclude on the discussion point of that very same meeting, it records the rationale to solicit a decision from the current government as opposed to permitting this decision to await the new government could include difficulties experienced by the military and the boost to the national economy. So there was some urgency, if I'm not mistaken, that was an election period where a decision to say, listen, before we have a change, potential change of ministers, etc., let us see if we can get this decision to the higher level as soon as possible.
Before we get to that, I just wanted to finish off this point that the ASB had then forgone the opportunity to make recommendation to the AAC, or am I putting it too strongly?
You're putting it very correctly.
Now, You then read from the discussion at item 34 and the rationale to solicit a decision from the current government, as opposed to permitting this decision to await the new government, and the fact that this could include difficulties for the military and the boost to the national economy. I'm not sure I quite understand that. You pointed to it specifically. Are you able to explain it probably in clearer terms than appears here?
No, other than to say, if my memory does not fail me, it was that election period. I think it was an election period, and the uncertainty of changing ministers, etc., before and after a decision has come, and the past experience of the Department of Defense is that a new minister may not necessarily concur with a set of programs. So a note was made that it'll be preferably better to have this matter served before the current minister rather than awaiting the change. So it may have been not well stated or overemphasized, but that was the gist. My understanding would have been the gist of it.
We know from testimony already placed before the Commission, and in fact from the annexures that you have provided, that subsequent to this meeting, there was yet another ASB meeting on the 16th of July, 1998. Is that correct?
Yes, there was.
Going back then to this minute, if you look at page 3, is that 64? 364. At the bottom, it is signed by D. Dewey SSO Acquisition, and it was intended to be signed by Pierre Steyn, chairman of the ASB, but instead was signed by Mr. Grundling on 25 February 1999. Do you know why Mr. Steyn did not sign this minute, and it could only be signed 8 months later by, I don't know the title, Grundling?
I think the question was why it was not signed by Mr. Steyn and signed by Jack Grundling. Jack Grundling acted as, if I'm not mistaken, the acting secretary after the resignation of the Secretary of Defense. Minutes of this committee meeting would have been signed at the very next meeting of the AASB, and so on and so on. This became an issue because subsequently in my affidavit, I showed documentary proof to say that we could not get the meetings minutes signed by the current chairperson. So in absence of the current chairperson making a decision to sign it, Jack Grundling signed it when he became the acting secretary, and you'll notice that Mr. Jack Grundling is a member to that meeting, and he's a full member to the AASB, and he's present on that day. So the minutes would have been written, compiled, waiting for signature. Unfortunately, they were not signed, and at some point, somebody had to take the initiative to sign them.
You proceed then at paragraph 54 to deal with the presentation made to the AAC after the ASB presentation of 8th July. And this, you say, was done on the 13th of July, 1998. And you deal with that at paragraph 54. Have you located it? And can you take us through it?
This was a presentation that was made to the minister, myself and Eric. The data that would have been captured in the presentation would be compiled by both the secretaries, Davi and Dewey, and that presentation then would have carried through the results that came from the SOFCOM, then went to the AASP, and then would have went to the ministers' AAC. Of importance here is that the Minister of Trade and Industry is accompanied with his Director General. So there's a continuum. The Director General of Trade and Industry was in the AASP presentation. He is now in the AAC. The Minister of Trade is there. The Minister is now carrying his colleague, Minister of Trade, with him in the decision making. And a presentation was made on both the lift options, which would have been the costed and non-costed option. It was a long meeting, lots of discussion. It was also agreed at that meeting to carry over the industrial participation presentation for the 16th. So half or part of that presentation would have followed on to the 16th, and it had to do with offset, whereas the main part of that briefing would have been who tendered, what was the scores, who are the winners, who are the second best, etc. So the 13 captured the key information to both the ministers.
And you have a minute of that meeting appearing as Annexure Z from page 382. Is that so?
Yes.
Now, if one page is through to page 390, those tables all the way to 398, are those the results you speak of, and do these tables reflect exactly what was captured by SOFCOM on the 1st and 2nd of July, 1998?
Yes, those are the tables, and I would presume they captured everything exactly.
Chair, Commissioner Musi, there had been a request on our part to have time to consult with this witness on one or two other aspects that don't currently form part of his statement, but which we believe that he must comment on. And we had requested, if it were possible, that we may break early today to finalize the issues with him. Having traveled from Australia, he could only avail himself for a very limited period, and we didn't have the opportunity to cover all the issues. So, commissioners, we had made this request of breaking off about half an hour earlier today to enable us to finalize these issues with the witness.
Would there be any objection? We suggest that we adjourn now, but then we start at 9:30 tomorrow morning.
None from me personally, Chair. I would be most indebted to the Commission.
Thank you. Advocate Kane?
Chair, we will do what suits the Commission.
Thank you. Advocate Fasan?
I have no objection.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, line on the bill?
No objection, Chair.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Sheikh, I think we're going to adjourn now, and we'll start tomorrow morning at 9:30. Thank you. We'll now adjourn.